The coffee was still warm when my wife announced she was checking out of our marriage. Not permanently, mind you. Vivian Harper would never be that direct. No, she needed space to think and would be staying at Sloan's for a few days. I'm Elliot Harper, but everyone calls me Eli. I own Harper Hardware on Main Street in our little New England mill town of Millbrook. It's the kind of place where everyone knows your business before you do, where gossip travels faster than the morning paper, and where a man's reputation can be built or destroyed over a cup of coffee at Murphy's Diner. Don't you have anything to say? Vivian stood in our kitchen doorway, designer suitcase in hand, looking like she was heading to a spa weekend rather than abandoning her husband of 8 years. I took another sip of coffee, studying her over the rim. Vivian worked in HR at the regional office complex, always dressed like she was interviewing for a better job. Today she wore a crisp white blouse and black slacks that probably cost more than most people in Millbrook made in a week. Take your time, I said, my voice as flat as day-old beer. She blinked, clearly expecting tears, begging, maybe some dramatic scene she could later describe to her friends as proof of my emotional instability. Instead, I just sat there, a 40-year-old hardware store owner in a flannel shirt and work jeans, giving her all the reaction of a man watching paint dry. That's it? That's all you're going to say? What would you like me to say, Viv? That I'm shocked? That I didn't see this coming? I stood up, rinsed my mug in the sink. You've been pulling away for months. Coming home late, always on your phone, suddenly interested in yoga classes that apparently don't exist. Her face flushed. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. I turned to face her, and for the first time in months, I felt completely calm. You want space? You've got it. She left 20 minutes later, her heels clicking across our hardwood floors like a countdown timer. I watched from the window as she loaded her suitcase into her silver Lexus, a car we definitely couldn't afford on a hardware store owner's salary, but somehow she'd convinced me we needed to project success. Mrs. Dunst from next door was already at her window, coffee mug in hand, taking in the show. At 73, Eleanor Dunst had elevated neighborhood watching to an art form. Nothing happened on Maple Street without her knowledge and subsequent distribution to the local gossip network. I gave her a little wave. She nearly dropped her mug. The house felt different after Vivian left. Quieter, but not in a lonely way. More like the silence after a headache finally stops. I walked through our home, a 1920s colonial that we'd bought 5 years ago when times were better, and really looked at it for the first time in months. Vivian's stuff was everywhere. Designer throw pillows that cost $50 each and served no practical purpose. Candles that were too pretty to burn, cluttering every surface. Fashion magazines stacked on tables, filled with lifestyles we couldn't afford, and women who looked nothing like the people in our town. I made a decision. By noon, I had 3 boxes packed with her clothes, shoes, and personal items. By 2 o'clock, I'd called Murphy's moving service. Old Pat Murphy owed me a favor after I'd helped him fix his truck last winter. By 4 o'clock, every single item that belonged to Vivian Harper was loaded onto Pat's truck with a shipping label addressed to her parents' house in Connecticut. You sure about this, Eli? Pat asked, adjusting his baseball cap. He was a good man, the kind who minded his own business, but would help a neighbor without question. She said she needed space, Pat. I'm giving her all the space she could want. I handed him an envelope. Make sure this gets delivered with the boxes. The note inside was simple. Viv, you wanted space. Now you've got it. Don't come back. E. After Pat's truck disappeared down Maple Street, I called the locksmith. Then I called our cell phone provider and removed Vivian's line from our family plan. Then I called our credit card companies and suspended her cards, all of which were in my name anyway, since her credit had been shot when we got married. By the time the sun set, Vivian Harper was effectively locked out of the life she'd decided she needed space from. I ordered pizza and ate it in my recliner, watching a baseball game on the TV that was no longer perpetually tuned to reality shows about housewives and dating competitions. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. My phone buzzed around 9 o'clock. A text from an unknown number. Eli, this is Sloan. Viv left her charger here. Can she swing by tomorrow to grab a few things? I typed back, no. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, what do you mean, no? I mean no. She can buy a new charger. My phone rang immediately. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. I turned it off and went to bed in the center of our king-size mattress for the first time in years. I woke up Wednesday morning to the sound of someone pounding on my front door like they were trying to break it down. Through the bedroom window, I could see Vivian's Lexus in the driveway, with Sloane's red BMW parked behind it. Sloane Mitchell was Vivian's best friend and worst influence rolled into one perfectly manicured package. She worked in marketing for some company that seemed to exist primarily to justify her expense account, and she treated drama like a competitive sport. The pounding continued as I made coffee and scrambled eggs, taking my time. Let them wait. Let the whole neighborhood see Vivian Harper losing her composure on her own front porch. Eli, open this door right now. Vivian's voice carried through the house, shrill with indignation. I ate my breakfast slowly, checking my phone. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and 1 voicemail that I deleted without listening to. My phone had been buzzing so much overnight, it sounded like an angry wasp trapped in a jar. The pounding stopped, replaced by the sound of a key scraping against the lock. Then more pounding. He changed the locks, I heard Sloane say. Oh my God, Viv, he actually changed the locks. This is illegal, Vivian shouted. This is my house, too. I finished my coffee and walked to the front door, but didn't open it. Morning, ladies. Beautiful day, isn't it? Eli, stop being ridiculous and open this door. Vivian's voice had shifted to that tone she used when talking to difficult customers at work, firm but condescending, like she was dealing with a child having a tantrum. Can't do that, Viv. You don't live here anymore, remember? You moved out yesterday. I didn't move out. I said I needed space. And I gave you space. All the space in Connecticut, actually. Your stuff should have arrived at your parents' house by now. Silence. Then, what do you mean, my stuff? I mean, I shipped everything that belonged to you to your parents' place. Seemed like the logical thing to do, since you're staying there now. The explosion of profanity that followed would have made a sailor blush. Sloane was clearly coaching from the sidelines, her voice a constant stream of, you don't have to take this, and call your lawyer. I opened the door just wide enough to peek out. Both women looked like they'd slept in their clothes. Vivian's usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her makeup was smudged. Sloane looked like she'd been crying, though I couldn't imagine why. You can't do this, Vivian said, but her voice had lost its authority. Actually, I can. You abandoned the marital residence. I have witnesses. I nodded toward Mrs. Dunst, who was now openly watching from her porch with a cup of tea and what looked like a notepad. I didn't abandon anything. I went to stay with a friend. After announcing you wanted space from our marriage, in front of witnesses. Mrs. Dunst waved helpfully from her porch. Vivian's face went white, then red. You bastard. You absolute bastard. Probably. But I'm a bastard who owns this house, pays the mortgage, and has every legal right to change the locks when his wife moves out. I started to close the door, then paused. Oh, and Viv? Your parents called this morning. They want to know why you shipped your lingerie to their house without washing it first. Apparently your mother was quite upset about the condition of some items. That was a lie, but the look of horror on Vivian's face made it worth it. Sloane actually gasped. I closed the door and went back to my coffee. The pounding resumed, accompanied by threats, pleas, and what sounded like Sloane reading legal statutes from her phone. I ignored all of it and called my brother Ricky. "You're not going to believe what happened," I said when he answered. "Try me. I've been watching the show from across the street for the last hour." Ricky owned Murphy's Bar, the kind of place where the beer was cold, the music was loud, and everybody knew your name whether you wanted them to or not. He lived in the apartment above the bar, which gave him a perfect view of the drama unfolding on Maple Street. "How long have they been out there?" "Since about 6:30. Mrs. Dunst's been taking pictures. Pretty sure she started a betting pool on when the cops show up." As if on cue, I heard a car door slam outside. Through the window, I saw Officer Dana Reeves walking up my front path, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Dana had graduated high school with Ricky and me. She was one of those cops who actually knew the community she served, which made her both effective and occasionally inconvenient for people trying to cause trouble. I opened the door before she could knock. "Morning, Dana." "Morning, Eli. Ladies." She nodded to Vivian and Sloane, who immediately started talking over each other. "Officer, this man has illegally locked me out of my own home. He shipped my belongings without permission. This is domestic abuse." Dana held up a hand, and the chatter stopped. "Mrs. Harper, did you leave the marital residence yesterday of your own free will?" "Well, yes, but—" "And did you announce your intention to stay elsewhere indefinitely?" "I said I needed space, but that doesn't mean—" "And Mr. Harper, do you have documentation showing you're the primary mortgage holder and legal owner of this property?" I handed her a folder I'd prepared. Mortgage papers, deed, property tax records, all in my name. Dana flipped through the documents. "Mrs. Harper, legally speaking, your husband has every right to secure his property. If you want access to retrieve personal belongings, you'll need to coordinate that through your attorneys." "But my things were shipped to a safe location at your husband's expense," I said. "Nothing was damaged or destroyed. Everything was handled professionally." Vivian looked like she was about to explode. Sloane was furiously typing on her phone, probably updating her social media followers on the drama. "This isn't over," Vivian said, grabbing Sloane's arm. "Come on, we're going to my lawyer." They stalked back to their cars, Vivian's heels clicking angrily on the sidewalk. As they drove away, I noticed Mrs. Dunst applauding silently from her porch. Dana shook her head. "You know this is going to get messy, right?" "It was already messy, Dana. I'm just cleaning house." She left, and I went back inside to enjoy the quietest Wednesday morning I'd had in years. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Chad. We need to talk." I stared at the message for a long moment. Chad Keating. So now I had a name to go with my suspicions. I typed back, "No, we don't." Then I blocked the number and started making plans. Chad Keating turned out to be exactly what I'd expected. A 30-something property developer who drove a Tesla, wore expensive suits, and had the kind of artificially white smile that screamed, "Trust fund, baby." I found this out by spending Thursday morning doing what any sensible man would do, research. Harvey Brennan had been my lab partner in high school chemistry and was now the town's only private investigator. He mostly handled insurance fraud and cheating spouse cases, which made him perfect for my needs. "So you want me to dig up dirt on this Chad guy?" Harvey asked, leaning back in his office chair. His office was above the hardware store 2 blocks down from mine, and it looked exactly like what you'd expect from a small-town PI: messy desk, filing cabinets that had seen better days, and a coffee maker that probably violated several health codes. "I want to know who I'm dealing with," I said. "Background, business dealings, personal life, everything." "And your wife?" "Soon-to-be ex-wife. And yeah, her too. Specifically, I want to know how long this has been going on and who else knows about it." Harvey nodded, making notes. "This is going to take a few days and cost you about $500. Take your time. Do it right." I left Harvey's office and drove across town to Chad's apartment complex, Millbrook Heights, a gleaming new development that looked like it belonged in Boston rather than our little mill town. The kind of place with a doorman, valet parking, and monthly rent that exceeded most people's mortgage payments. I parked across the street and waited. At 12:30, Vivian's Lexus pulled into the visitor parking area. Interesting. She was supposed to be at work. I watched her walk into the building, and 15 minutes later I saw her silhouette in a third-floor window. She wasn't alone. My phone rang. "Ricky, where are you?" "Conducting surveillance." "Jesus, Eli, you're not a cop." "No, but I'm a man who's about to be divorced, and I want to make sure I have all the facts before I talk to a lawyer." "Fair enough. You want backup?" "Actually, yeah. Bring your camera." Ricky arrived 20 minutes later in his pickup truck, carrying a camera with a telephoto lens that looked like it could photograph satellites. "Where'd you get that?" "Bought it to take pictures of birds. Turns out I'm not much of a nature photographer, but it's great for other kinds of wildlife." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the building. At 2:15, Vivian and Chad emerged together. She was laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his arm in a way that made my stomach tighten. Ricky started taking pictures. They got into Chad's Tesla and drove toward downtown. We followed at a distance, ending up at Millbrook's fanciest restaurant, a place called Seasons that charged $30 for a salad and required reservations weeks in advance. "They're not exactly keeping this low-key," Ricky observed. "No, they're not." My phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. "At work late tonight. Don't wait up." I showed the message to Ricky, who snorted. "She's got balls, I'll give her that." We watched them through the restaurant window, sharing appetizers and wine like any other couple on a date. Chad kept reaching across the table to touch her hand. She kept giggling like a teenager. After an hour, they left together, heading back to Chad's apartment. "Seen enough?" Ricky asked. "More than enough." That evening, I sat in my kitchen with a beer and my laptop, creating a Dropbox account under a fake name. I uploaded all of Ricky's photos, along with screenshots of Vivian's text messages claiming to be at work. Then I did something that probably wasn't entirely legal but felt absolutely necessary. I logged into our shared iCloud account and downloaded every photo Vivian had taken in the last 6 months. The pictures told a story. Dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend trips I'd known nothing about, photos of Chad that she'd clearly taken when he wasn't looking, the kind of candid shots you take when you're infatuated with someone. And then I found the screenshots. Text conversations between Vivian and Sloan, discussing her situation with Chad and her exit strategy from our marriage. Plans to claim I was emotionally abusive. Discussions about hiding assets. Strategies for getting the house in a divorce settlement. I stared at the screen, feeling something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't a woman who'd fallen out of love and made a mistake. This was someone who'd been planning to destroy me for months. I created a new Dropbox link and uploaded everything. The photos, the screenshots, the evidence of her lies about working late. I titled the folder "You're Not Special" and sent the link to Vivian's phone from an anonymous email account. Then I sat back and waited. My phone rang at 11:47 p.m. "You sick son of a bitch!" Vivian's voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "How dare you spy on me?" "I didn't spy on you, Viv. You left a trail of breadcrumbs that a blind man could follow. Those photos were private. Those photos were taken with a phone on my family plan, stored in an iCloud account that I pay for, and they document adultery. Nothing private about that. I'll sue you for invasion of privacy." "With what money?" "I canceled your credit cards, remember?" The line went quiet for a moment, then, "You bastard. So you keep saying." "Did you enjoy the other pictures in that folder? The ones of Chad with his other girlfriend?" Another pause. Longer this time. "What other girlfriend?" "Check the folder again, Viv. Apparently you're not as special as you thought." I hung up and turned off my phone. The next morning, Mrs. Dunst called to tell me that someone had been screaming in the parking lot of Millbrook Heights at midnight, and the police had been called to break up a domestic disturbance. I made coffee and started planning my next move. Friday morning brought Harvey's preliminary report and the kind of gossip that spreads through a small town like wildfire. Apparently, Vivian and Chad's midnight parking lot screaming match had been witnessed by half the residents of Millbrook Heights, and someone had posted video footage to the local Facebook group. "Your wife's got quite a set of lungs on her," Harvey said, sliding a folder across his desk. "But that's not the interesting part." I opened the folder and started reading. Chad Keating wasn't just a property developer. He was a property developer with a history of cutting corners, stiffing contractors, and leaving projects half-finished when the money ran out. He'd been sued 6 times in the last 3 years, and his current project, a luxury condo development on the outskirts of town, was already 3 months behind schedule and significantly over budget. "He's leveraged to the hilt," Harvey continued. "The Tesla's leased, the apartment's rented, and he owes money to half the contractors in the county. He's basically broke but putting on a good show." "What about personal life?" "That's where it gets interesting. Your wife isn't his first affair. There's a pattern here. He targets married women with stable incomes and financial resources. Rebecca Morrison, Jennifer Walsh, Susan Chen. All married, all had affairs with Chad, all ended up divorced and financially ruined." Harvey pulled out another set of photos. "This is Rebecca Morrison. She's waitressing at the diner on Route 9 now, living in a studio apartment above the pizza place. Used to be married to Tom Morrison, who owned Morrison Construction. I studied the photos. Rebecca looked tired, older than her years, defeated. Chad destroyed her marriage, borrowed money from her husband's business, then disappeared when things got complicated. Tom lost his company, his house, everything." "And the other women?" "Similar stories. Chad's basically a parasite who feeds on other people's marriages and bank accounts." I closed the folder, feeling that cold anger settle deeper in my chest. "What else?" "Well, here's the thing that might interest you most. Chad's current development project? He needs one more investor to keep it afloat, and he's been courting the Brennan Group, my cousin Mike's investment firm. Mike's been asking around about Chad's reputation, and let's just say the reviews haven't been glowing. Think Mike would be interested in some additional information about Chad's character." Harvey grinned. "I think Mike would be very interested in knowing what kind of man he's considering doing business with." I left Harvey's office with a plan forming in my mind and drove to Murphy's bar to find Ricky. It was barely noon, but the bar was already half full of regulars, retirees, shift workers, and the kind of people who treated Murphy's like their personal social club. "You look like a man with a mission," Ricky said, pouring me a beer without being asked. "I need a favor." "Name it." "I need you to spread some gossip." Ricky laughed. "Brother, you've come to the right place." "What kind of gossip?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the video from the Millbrook Heights parking lot. Vivian and Chad had a public meltdown last night. Apparently she found out about his other girlfriend. Holy shit. She really went nuclear on him. The video's already making rounds on Facebook, but I want to make sure it gets maximum distribution, especially to anyone who might be considering doing business with Chad Keating. Consider it done. By this afternoon, everyone in town will have seen this. While Ricky worked his magic with the local gossip network, I drove to Vivian's office. I didn't go inside. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I parked where I could see the parking lot and waited. She didn't show up. At 3 p.m., I called her office and asked to speak with Vivian Harper in HR. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper is out sick today," the receptionist said. "Oh, that's too bad. Will she be in Monday?" "I'm not sure. She's requested the rest of the week off for personal reasons." Personal reasons. Right. I drove back to Chad's apartment complex and parked across the street. At 4:30, I saw him emerge from the building, looking like he'd been through a blender. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and he kept checking his phone like he was expecting bad news. He got into his Tesla and drove toward downtown. I followed. Chad's first stop was the bank, where he spent 45 minutes in what looked like an increasingly heated conversation with a loan officer. When he came out, his face was red and he was talking angrily into his phone. His second stop was Murphy's bar. I parked down the street and watched as Chad walked into my brother's establishment, looking around like he was entering enemy territory. Which, to be fair, he was. My phone buzzed. Text from Ricky. "Your boy just walked in. You might want to get down here." I was already moving. When I walked into Murphy's, Chad was at the bar, nursing a whiskey and looking like a man who'd lost a fight with life itself. The regular crowd was giving him suspicious looks. Word had clearly gotten around about who he was and what he'd been doing. "Afternoon, Chad," I said, taking the stool next to him. He turned, and I saw something like relief in his eyes. "Eli." "Thank God. We need to talk." "Do we?" "This is all a misunderstanding. Vivian and you what? Had a misunderstanding about whether you were screwing other women behind her back?" The bar went quiet. In a place like Murphy's, a confrontation was better than cable TV. Chad's face flushed. "Look, I know how this looks. It looks like you're a predator who targets married women, destroys their families, and moves on to the next victim when things get complicated. That's not Rebecca Morrison, Jennifer Walsh, Susan Chen. Should I keep going?" Chad's whiskey glass stopped halfway to his mouth. "How do you know about your pattern?" "Because I'm not an idiot, Chad, unlike the women you target." I stood up, and suddenly the bar felt very small. Chad was taller than me, but he looked like he'd never been in a real fight in his life. I'd been swinging hammers and moving lumber for 20 years. "Here's what's going to happen," I said quietly. "You're going to stay away from my wife. You're going to stay away from my family, and you're going to stay the hell away from me. You can't threaten me." "I'm not threatening you, I'm explaining the situation." Chad stood up, trying to look intimidating. It might have worked in a boardroom, but Murphy's bar wasn't a boardroom, and the men watching us weren't impressed by his expensive suit. "You think you scare me?" he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I don't want to scare you, Chad. I want you to understand that you picked the wrong family to mess with." He took a step toward me, and I could smell the desperation on him. This was a man whose carefully constructed life was falling apart, and he was looking for someone to blame. "Your wife came to me," he said. "She was unhappy, neglected." I moved faster than he expected, grabbing the bar rag from Ricky's hand and slapping Chad across the face with it. Not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to humiliate him in front of a room full of witnesses. The bar erupted in laughter. Chad's face went white, then red. He swung at me, a wild, desperate punch that I easily dodged. He stumbled, caught himself on the bar, and suddenly found himself surrounded by a dozen men who didn't appreciate outsiders causing trouble in their local establishment. "I think you should leave," Ricky said calmly. Chad looked around the room, realized he was outnumbered, and headed for the door, but he couldn't resist one last parting shot. "This isn't over," he called back. "Yeah, it is," I said. "You just don't know it yet." He left, and the bar returned to normal, except now I had a dozen new allies and Chad Keating had made himself persona non grata in the one place in town where a man's reputation actually mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from Harvey. "Mike Brennan wants to meet with you tomorrow. He's very interested in what you have to say about Chad Keating." I smiled and ordered another beer. Saturday morning I met Mike Brennan at his office in the business district. Mike was Harvey's cousin and the kind of investor who'd made his money by being very careful about who he did business with. His office was clean, professional, and decorated with photos of successful projects and satisfied clients. "Harvey tells me you have some concerns about Chad Keating," Mike said, gesturing for me to sit. "I have information about Chad Keating. Whether you consider it concerning is up to you." I laid out everything Harvey had found, plus the photos and videos from the past few days. Mike listened without interruption, taking notes and occasionally asking for clarification. "This is quite a pattern," he said finally. "It's a business model. Chad targets married women with financial resources, destroys their marriages, takes what he can and moves on. The affair with my wife is just his latest project." Mike nodded slowly. "And you're telling me this because I don't want to see another family destroyed by this man, and because I think you should know who you're considering as a business partner. I appreciate your honesty, Eli. This gives me a lot to think about." I left Mike's office feeling like I'd accomplished something important. Chad's financial lifeline was about to be cut, and he didn't even know it yet. My next stop was the Millbrook Heights apartment complex. I parked across the street and called the building's management office. "Hi, this is Detective Morrison with the Millbrook Police," I said, deepening my voice slightly. "We've had some complaints about disturbances in your building. Specifically, apartment 3C. "Oh, you must mean Mr. Keating's unit," the manager said. "We've had several noise complaints this week. Has there been any damage to the property?" "Well, we haven't done an inspection yet, but some residents have reported shouting, things being thrown. You might want to do that inspection sooner." "Rather than later," I said. "These domestic situations can escalate quickly." I hung up and smiled. Chad's day was about to get worse. At 2 p.m., I drove to the edge of town where Chad's construction project was located. Keating Luxury Condos was supposed to be a 40-unit development of high-end housing for young professionals. What I found was a half-finished construction site with equipment sitting idle and a sign announcing the project was temporarily delayed. I parked and walked around the site taking pictures. The foundation work was shoddy, the framing looked questionable, and there were piles of building materials sitting in the weather, slowly deteriorating. My phone rang. "Harvey, you're not going to believe this," he said. "Chad just got evicted from his apartment." "What?" Building management did an inspection after receiving an anonymous tip about property damage. Apparently his place was trashed, holes in walls, broken furniture, the works. They gave him 2 hours to get out. I looked around the abandoned construction site and felt a deep satisfaction. "Where is he now?" "Last I heard, he was loading his stuff into his car. The Tesla's packed like a clown car." "And Vivian?" "That's the interesting part. She's not with him. Word is they had another fight, and she's back at Sloane's place, but Sloane's getting tired of the drama." I drove back to town, stopping at the grocery store to pick up supplies for dinner. As I was loading bags into my truck, I saw a familiar silver Tesla parked at the far end of the lot. Chad was sitting in the driver's seat, talking on his phone, surrounded by boxes and suitcases. He looked like a man whose world had collapsed in the span of a week. Our eyes met across the parking lot. He ended his call and got out of the car, walking toward me with the determined stride of a man who had nothing left to lose. "You son of a bitch," he said when he reached my truck. "You did this." "Did what?" "Don't play dumb. The eviction, the investors pulling out, the whole town treating me like a pariah. This is all you." I closed my tailgate and looked at him. Up close, Chad looked terrible. His expensive clothes were wrinkled, his hair was greasy, and he had the kind of desperate look that comes from watching your carefully constructed life fall apart. "I didn't do anything, Chad. I just made sure people knew who you really were." "You ruined my life." "No, I exposed your life." "There's a difference." He took a step closer, and I could smell the alcohol on his breath. "You think you're so smart. You think you won? I think I protected my community from a predator." "Your wife hates you. She told me everything, how boring you are, how small your life is, how she felt trapped. And yet she's not in that car with you, is she?" Chad's face crumpled, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "She was supposed to leave with me," he said quietly. "We had plans." "You had plans." "Vivian had fantasies. There's a difference." I got in my truck and drove away, leaving Chad standing alone in the parking lot next to his overpacked Tesla, looking like a man who'd finally run out of other people's lives to ruin. That evening, I was grilling burgers on my back patio when my phone rang. Unknown number. Eli? This is Rebecca Morrison. I remembered the name from Harvey's report, one of Chad's previous victims. What can I do for you, Rebecca? I heard what you did. How you stopped him. I just made sure people had accurate information. You did more than that. You stood up to him. You fought back. Her voice was quiet, but there was something like gratitude in it. I wanted to thank you. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. When Chad was destroying my marriage, I felt so alone. Like no one would believe me, or like it was somehow my fault. You showed that it wasn't just me, that he's the problem. After she hung up, I sat on my patio, eating my burger and watching the sun set over Millbrook. For the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. We need to talk. I typed back, no, we don't. Please, I made a mistake. You made a lot of mistakes. I want to come home. I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about the screenshots I'd seen, the plans she'd made, the months of lies and manipulation. You don't have a home here anymore, I typed. You made your choice. I blocked her number and finished my burger in peace. Sunday morning brought the kind of perfect New England fall day that makes you remember why you choose to live in a small town despite all its complications. The leaves were turning, the air was crisp, and Millbrook was preparing for its annual harvest festival in the town square. I was drinking coffee on my front porch when Mrs. Dunst came over, carrying a plate of homemade muffins and wearing the expression of someone who had gossip to share. Thought you might like some breakfast, she said, settling into the chair next to mine without being invited. Thank you, Eleanor. What's the word from the neighborhood watch? Well, since you ask, there's been quite a bit of activity. That Chad fellow was seen at the motel on Route 9 last night, and apparently he's been calling everyone in town trying to find work. Any takers? Not a one. Word gets around, you know. People don't like being taken advantage of. I bit into a muffin. Blueberry, still warm. What about Vivian? That's the interesting part. She's been staying with Sloan, but apparently they had a falling out. Something about Sloan posting too much on Facebook about the whole situation. I pulled out my phone and checked the local gossip groups. Sure enough, Sloan had been documenting the entire drama like it was her personal reality show, complete with screenshots of text conversations and play-by-play updates of every development. Looks like Sloan's been busy, I said. Oh, that's nothing. Wait until you see what she posted this morning. Mrs. Dunst showed me her phone. Sloan's latest post was a long, rambling essay about toxic friends and people who drag you into their drama. The comments section was brutal, dozens of people calling out Vivian by name, sharing their own stories about Chad, and generally treating the whole situation like public entertainment. Vivian's not going to like this, I said. Vivian's going to hate this. She's always been so concerned about appearances, about what people think. This is her worst nightmare. As if summoned by our conversation, Vivian's Lexus turned onto Maple Street. But instead of stopping at my house, she pulled into Mrs. Dunst's driveway. Oh my, Mrs. Dunst said. This should be interesting. Vivian got out of her car looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had the hollow-eyed look of someone who'd been crying for hours. She walked across the yard toward us, moving like she was walking through deep water. Eli, she said, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. Please, can we talk? We can talk right here, I said. Mrs. Dunst doesn't mind, do you, Eleanor? Not at all, dear. I'll just sit here quietly. Vivian looked like she wanted to object, but she didn't have much choice. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. I know that now. Which mistake was that? The affair, the lies, or the plan to claim I was abusive in order to steal my house? Her face went white. You weren't supposed to see those messages. But I did see them. All of them. I was angry. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking very clearly. You spent months planning how to destroy me and take everything I'd worked for. That's not a mistake, Vivian. That's a deliberate choice. She started crying, the kind of dramatic tears she'd always used to get her way. I lost my job. Did you know that? Someone sent my boss screenshots of my text messages, and now I'm suspended pending investigation. Sounds like your choices have consequences. Chad left town, just disappeared without even saying goodbye. I gave up everything for him, and he just left. You didn't give up everything for him. You threw everything away because you thought you deserved better than what you had. Mrs. Dunst was trying to look like she wasn't listening to every word, but I could see her taking mental notes for later distribution to the neighborhood network. I want to come home, Vivian said. I want to fix this. There's nothing to fix. We're done. You can't mean that. I stood up, walked to the porch railing, and looked down at the woman I'd been married to for 8 years. Vivian, you didn't just cheat on me. You planned to destroy me. You were going to claim I was abusive, steal my house, and leave me with nothing. The only reason you want to come back now is because your other plan didn't work out. That's not true. It's exactly true. If Chad hadn't turned out to be a broke con man, if his business hadn't collapsed, if he hadn't left town, you'd still be with him. You're not here because you love me or because you're sorry. You're here because you ran out of options. The tears were flowing freely now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no desire to comfort her. Just a cold, clean certainty that this chapter of my life was over. Please, she whispered. No. She stood there for another minute waiting for me to change my mind, to soften, to be the pushover she'd married. When it became clear that wasn't going to happen, she walked back to her car. This isn't over, she called back, echoing Chad's words from the bar. Yeah, it is, I said. You just don't want to admit it. She drove away, and Mrs. Dunst and I finished our coffee in comfortable silence. That afternoon, the Harvest Festival filled the town square with families, food vendors, and the kind of community spirit that makes small towns special. I walked through the crowd, stopping to chat with customers, neighbors, and friends. The story of Vivian and Chad had become local legend, told and retold with the kind of embellishment that turns real events into cautionary tales. I was cast as the hero, the wronged husband who'd stood up for himself and his community. Chad was the villain, the outsider who'd tried to take advantage of local people. Vivian was the fool who'd thrown away a good thing for a fantasy. I didn't correct anyone's version of events. The truth was complicated, but the story people were telling served a purpose. It reinforced the idea that actions have consequences, that loyalty matters, and that sometimes the underdog wins. As the sun set, I found myself at Murphy's bar with Ricky and a crowd of regulars, celebrating not just the festival, but the end of a chapter that had been hanging over the town like a storm cloud. So what's next? Ricky asked, raising his beer. Next, I go back to running my hardware store, living in my house and enjoying the peace and quiet. No regrets? I thought about the question seriously. 8 years of marriage gone. A life I'd built with someone, ended. Plans and dreams, abandoned. No regrets, I said finally. Sometimes the best thing you can do is recognize when something is over and let it end cleanly. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for everything you did. Chad won't be bothering anyone else. Rebecca. I showed the message to Ricky, who grinned. Looks like you're a hero. I'm just a guy who got tired of being taken advantage of. We drank until closing time, telling stories and laughing like men who'd survived something difficult and come out stronger. When I finally drove home to my quiet house on Maple Street, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Contentment. The next morning, I found a note taped to my front door. Vivian's handwriting, shaky and desperate. I know you hate me now, but I need you to know that I did love you once. I'm sorry for everything. I'm leaving town. Don't try to find me. I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash. Then I made coffee, sat on my front porch, and watched the sun rise over Millbrook. Mrs. Dunst came over around 8, carrying another plate of muffins and the latest gossip. Vivian's car was seen heading toward the highway last night, she reported, packed full of suitcases. Good for her. And that Chad fellow? Apparently he was arrested in Albany for writing bad checks. I smiled. Karma's a funny thing. Indeed it is, dear. Indeed it is. I spent the rest of the morning at the hardware store, helping customers, restocking shelves, and doing the kind of honest work that had always given my life meaning. Around noon, Harvey stopped by with final paperwork, documentation of everything we'd uncovered, organized and ready for divorce proceedings. You know, he said, I've handled a lot of these cases over the years. Usually everyone ends up worse off than when they started. But you actually came out ahead. How do you figure? You got rid of a wife who was planning to destroy you, exposed a con man who was hurting people, and turned yourself into something of a local hero. Plus, you kept your house, your business, and your dignity. That's a pretty good outcome. He was right. I'd started the week as a man whose wife was cheating on him, and I'd ended it as a man who'd taken control of his life and protected his community. I'd gone from victim to victor, and I'd done it without compromising my principles or breaking any laws. That evening, I grilled a steak on my back patio, drank a beer, and watched baseball on the TV that was now permanently tuned to whatever I wanted to watch. The house was quiet, clean, and entirely mine. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Eli? This is Jennifer Walsh. Another name from Harvey's report. Another one of Chad's victims. I heard what you did, she said. How you stopped him. I wanted to thank you. You don't need to. Yes, I do. When Chad destroyed my marriage, I felt so ashamed, so stupid, like it was my fault for trusting him. But seeing what you did, how you fought back, it made me realize that he was the problem, not me. Not any of us. After she hung up, I sat in my backyard thinking about the ripple effects of standing up for yourself. Chad was gone, Vivian was gone, and the people they'd hurt were starting to heal. I'd asked for nothing more than to be left alone to live my life in peace. Instead, I'd gotten something better. The knowledge that sometimes, when you stand up to bullies, you don't just save yourself, you save everyone else they might have hurt. She said she needed space. I gave her the whole damn state.